We are going to depart from the witness list in one way. We are going to call the president of the SUNY Student Assembly because he is the on the trustee. He's a trustee on the board, and they are having a trustee meeting, and he will need to get to the board in order to be part of the discussion and part of the vote. So we are going to call Marc Cohen, President of the Student Assembly of the State of New York.
Okay, all right.
University.
I wondered because it was a change. I thought, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And apologies to everybody else who thought they were next.
Because I really have some thoughts about that that I wanted to communicate. Thank you.
And as the House gets in order, please, Mark, commence.
Thank you, Chairperson Glick, and I appreciate your deviating from the schedule such that I could make it back to New York City in time for the vote on our budget request. To give a background, the Student Assembly is the recognized student government organization for the State University of New York's 600,000 students and 64 campuses. So I have the distinct honor of representing that constituency here today. I would like to reiterate my SUNY colleagues' thanks to the distinguished officers here today. It is always an incredible opportunity to come before officials such as yourselves to discuss critical issues in higher education. Truly few issues are as pressing as the affordability crisis faced by so many in our state. As you know, the SUNY Student Assembly represents over 600,000 students from across the state of New York, with students from every single Senate and Assembly district and campuses from Long Island and New York City all the way to Rochester and Buffalo. It is no secret that students have borne the brunt of rising costs in higher education. For 5 consecutive years, we saw our tuition raised. When at long last we found respite this past year, many of my friends were excluded from the deal, including the tens of thousands of graduate students that produce world-class research across the state and out-of-state undergraduate students as well. We do recognize that in order to improve academic quality, revenue and expenditures must steadily increase. However, a college education is both a private and a public good. In fact, our research shows that every dollar invested in public higher education in New York State yields $5 of economic activity. Students with baccalaureate degrees make on average $1 million more during their lifetime, rely less on social assistance programs post-graduation, live healthier lifestyles, and contribute higher shares of tax revenues. We would like to give credit where credit is due. Students are appreciative of marginal increases to community college base aid, increased enrollment in the tuition assistance program, and a string of increases to vital programs like EOP. With that in mind, it is also important for us to be frank in recognizing the factors that have resulted in an increased burden on our students. While the share of college costs paid for us has steadily risen, the state share has steadily and substantially declined since 2008. I would like to be clear. It is not the fault of the Board of Trustees that tuition increased so dramatically, so quickly. Rather, it is a lack of investment from the state that forced the board's hand to pay professors, keep the lights on, and maintain a level of quality that students have come to expect from the State University of New York. I would like to discuss a few methods through which the state can help balance this lopsided funding mechanism. I don't need to reiterate the data points to show that SUNY students rely on the tuition assistance program in order to recognize their dream of completing a degree. I have some additional figures regarding that program that I would like to share with you today. Of the roughly 40,000 graduate students that study and research at SUNY institutions, not one receive a single penny from the tuition assistance program. Of the tens of thousands of students whose household income is above $80,000 per year, none receive grants from the tuition assistance program. While that figure, $80,000, seems generous, it is crucial to remember that our state has great geographic and financial diversity. A report from the New York Times shows that someone making $70,000 a year in other parts of the state would need to make $166,000 a year in Manhattan to enjoy the same purchasing power. And yet our financial aid metrics don't accurately reflect these varying needs. It is right and just that students at the most vulnerable end of the socioeconomic spectrum receive vital support to ensure their success. However, we cannot leave the middle class behind. In abdicating responsibility and blaming some other state office, that is exactly what happens. the middle class is left behind. This year, the Student Assembly created a trilateral plan to put SUNY on the path toward debt-free higher education. There are three primary aspects to affordability: base funding, need-based aid, and repayment reform. We are dedicated to continue working with the legislature to secure a commitment to full maintenance of effort, and we are appreciative of this body's efforts to secure such. Over the course of the next 4 years, it appears as though state systems will be forced to reform internally without expectation of significant federal investment. As such, we are looking to ally with the legislature to secure a matched commitment from the state for every additional dollar that students pay in tuition. On the subject of the tuition assistance program itself, while generous, this program has long been in need of both expansion and reform. It is easy to be comforted by figures that show SUNY students below national student debt averages, but that should not desensitize us to the fact that these graduates are facing more than a decade of being saddled by inescapable higher education debt. We must modernize financial aid metrics. The system in place currently gives only a warped perception of a family's ability to afford higher education. We need a more sophisticated approach to financial aid to consider purchasing power and regional cost of living and reflect those in determining eligibility for financial aid awards. We also need to smooth the financial speed bumps, preventing many students from pursuing advanced degrees, which compound many of the same benefits that I discussed before. We need to reinstate TAP for graduate students if we are to have any hope of competing with other public research universities in size and prestige. Research across the country and right here in New York show that the system is trending toward non-traditional part-time students. Often these students are left with little to no financial aid, which can slow or completely eliminate the hope of completion. Students are not without common sense. We are keenly aware of difficult fiscal realities, in fact, likely more so than any other constituency in the state. We appreciate the fact that expanding TAP eligibility comes with a sizable price tag. But to everyone who says that New York State simply cannot afford this increase, I reply that that is what the students of the State University of New York have been saying for the past half-decade. I thank you all for your time, and I urge you to stand with students and families on your deliberations. Thank you very much.
With apologies to those who were given, we often say that it's good to hear from some of the folks who are directly affected. So we hear perhaps from commissioners, and then by the end of the day we hear from the folks who actually receive services that the commissioners provide through their agencies, and it informs questions that we might otherwise not have asked. So it's actually, even though we would like to flip all of our hearings around, it doesn't always work that way. People get very actually upset if we try to do that. So, but this is an opportunity to just say, first of all, the tuition increases that occurred over the last 5 years, some of your predecessors in the Student Assembly were wholeheartedly in support of that. And I think it was because there was a sense that it was an opportunity or a way to get more course offerings that might make it easier to complete one's education, that it might improve the number of student faculty ratio, more full-time faculty that would enhance the experience and the education for students. The state did not commit to increasing aid, but at least, as had happened in the past, did not have the money fly out the back door, so that the students paid more in tuition and a commensurate amount of money went off the budget. Now, certainly most of us here, I would say all of us here, agree that the state should contribute a larger amount of funding to operating aid and financial aid. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you think that at least those tuition increases and the maintenance of effort did provide some improved access to course offerings and increase the possibility that students could get the coursework that they needed in order to complete work on or near on time.
I appreciate you bringing up my predecessors, because I was part of the Student Assembly. In fact, I've testified at this very table before many of you, discussing the tuition increases that came our way. And it was very difficult when talking to members and to the press, because we did support SUNY 2020. We supported the expansion of SUNY 2020. But we would be asked, so that means you support tuition increases. And you had said, students supported those very, tuition increases. Students have never, will never, are not now supporting tuition increases. What the students of the State University of New York supported in SUNY 2020 is the predictability, is, as you said, Chair, the hundreds of new programs, the hundreds of new faculty, and the improved quality of the State University of New York. So insofar as SUNY 2020 contributed to that, we absolutely support the plan. It is not the increase in tuition, however, that we have ever supported, and in fact came out blatantly saying, no, we do not support the increases in tuition, but we support the aspects of 2020 that come with predictability and that improve the quality of life for the students at the State University.
As we go forward, there will undoubtedly be a discussion during the budget process of the level of support that the state, we don't know what that will be presented to us, but students' number one job is to get an education. When I went to school, that was kind of my number one job, but we had a couple of other jobs that had to do with societal. So we felt it was our job to stop the war. We felt it was our job to change the pernicious abortion laws that negatively impacted women. And in fact, we did do those things. So I'm wondering, in the course of the next few months, does the Student Assembly think that part of their job, aside from getting an education, is to mobilize themselves and their families, frankly, if in fact we're presented with flat funding or cuts, and whether you think the Student Assembly has the ability on campuses to raise those voices and make it clear that as future taxpayers, you believe that you're entitled to some additional services.
Chair, I say this not because I'm the president this year. There are members of our team who are here as well who get the credit for this. The Student Assembly is stronger now than it has ever been before. And much of that comes from our ability to advocate and our ability to mobilize our students across 64 campuses and engage them in these discussions. The new Student Life Committee on the SUNY Board of Trustees, I have the honor of co-chairing as president of the Student Assembly and as the student trustee on the board. We address that issue exactly. How can we mobilize our students, but more importantly, how can we mobilize parents and families and guardians to engage in these issues, to engage with you as our elected leaders to ensure that our voices are being heard? And by holding not just one advocacy day once a year in Albany, the SUNY Speaks Up event that we have in March, but advocating to all of you in your district offices, having our community college students advocate to their local county legislators to ensure that their voices are being heard, so that we're mobilizing more than just once a year, but that we're mobilizing on more than just this one particular issue. Should we be faced, which I'm sure we will, with adversity in other areas, be it diversity, equity, and inclusion, be it flat funding, be it sustainability efforts or military affairs, we have an infrastructure in place now to effectively advocate for these issues, and I hope that by the time session is out this year, over the next few months, I hope that you're sick of hearing from students of the State University of New York Student Assembly, because we have a plan here. I have somebody, I don't know, Nick Simons is around here somewhere, and that's his job to make sure that we're mobilizing our students.
On the tuition assistance program, it is one of the more generous programs in the state, and we certainly understand and have had within the committee a number of proposals. They cost a certain amount of money. We've moved the dime, the ball incrementally on a few items. What would you put as your number 1 and 2 priority, understanding that you have 5 or more But if we are limited in our ability, what do you feel from your position as a student leader would be the two most important things that we could try to address in the upcoming budget?
I think number one is the TAP gap that Eileen and the Chancellor spoke about just before me, and that's $60 million that comes out of our operating budget from the state. And if we can redirect that $60 million to faculty and to programs and to other such initiatives on campuses rather than filling that gap, I think that we would see some substantive and tangible improvements on campuses. I think secondary to that, and you're forcing me to pick two, I think secondary to that would be graduate TAP. We haven't had grad TAP since 2010, I believe. And reinstating graduate TAP and allowing those students the opportunity to study and earn an education without being saddled with such significant debt would be a spectacular advancement. I know that both are very expensive, and I know that money is not necessarily plentiful, but those are two things that we're going to be advocating for strongly.
Be assured that we understand that there are regional cost of living differences. As a legislature, we come from all over the state, so we certainly do personally understand that. And we understand that we haven't had an increase at the top income level. But that turns out to be a very expensive item. But I just want you to know that it is something that we're aware of, we're thinking about, and in the course of conversation. But it's very helpful for the committee to know the two issues that we should try to get done and then work on the third.
Absolutely, and I would quickly add before taking, I'd love additional questions, but issues of textbook affordability, issues of fees on campuses, the fees associated with tuition, room and board costs are continuing to increase, in the fees, and so those are something that as the student assembly we're watching, and as within my role on the board that I'm watching as well, to ensure that we're not pricing students out that way, because I think that that's a critical area as well.
We understand and have talked about the future of folding more fees into tuition, which are then eligible for some supports. But at the moment, we've got our priorities, and you're helpful in supporting that.
I just have one quick question about graduate students, which you've raised a few times. Are you a graduate student or not?
I am. I should have said, I'm sorry, I'm a graduate student at the University of Albany. I'm studying public administration and policy. I graduated with my bachelor's from UAlbany this past May.
Great, thank you. In the conversations that you have in student assembly, what is the proportion of graduate students to undergraduate students in that body?
So we have within the student assembly on our executive committee, on my cabinet, the people who I appoint and who are confirmed by our legislative body. Nick, how many are grad students? Help me out.
I'd say 5.
So 5 are grad students, so that represents just about half. And then within our legislative branch, if you will, they're the representatives. We've got 2 graduate representatives who represent doctoral granting institutions. We also have students from comprehensive campuses who are grad students, but they represent the comprehensives as well. So I think there are 4 of our legislative body members who are grad students.
Okay. And among young people in colleges today, we know that high school students feel more and more pressure to attend post-secondary education, whether it's the community college level and a career or technical credential or a 4-year degree. It seems to me, and I'm just curious about your reflection on this, that there is greater pressure among undergraduate students to go on to graduate school. Do you have any sense of those numbers or the proportion of undergraduate students that feel that they need to go to graduate school to get a job?
I don't have those figures. I'm going to be down in the city with SUNY staff and I can look, we'll make sure that we, because that's an excellent question. What I can tell you is that your concern, Assemblywoman, is accurate, that we see, as the Chancellor spoke about, we see all of these job vacancies that aren't being filled. And it's because either students aren't graduating in the degrees that these jobs call for, or because they need an advanced level of degree. You know, my parents talk about how when they were younger, you needed a high school diploma. That was an absolute. And then time went by and you needed a bachelor's degree. And it is becoming a time now where in order to achieve excellence in your career, that you need a graduate level degree. And students recognize that. It is a pressure on students, and it's a pressure because of the increased cost of graduate education as well. It's an excellent point. It's one that we've discussed, but we haven't honed in and focused on. And I'm going to go back to, we have an executive committee meeting coming up, and then we'll have a meeting with our presidents in the early months of the next semester. And I'm going to ask them what their thoughts are on that. I think that that's a great question.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pat?
No questions. I just want to say a shout out to Mark, and you've brought tremendous energy to this position, and I'm very proud to represent UAlbany where he attends. So
right.
Thank you. It's been refreshing and great to see how visible you are at so many events, as well as your visibility on social media. So keep it up, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for your unwavering support of us and of UAlbany as well.
Mark, I want to thank you for the work you do, because it's a whole other level of education, and you're representing students on the Board of Trustees. And thank you for being here today and raising and giving us some guidance about the direction we should be going.
Well, thank you, and I can't express how wonderful it is that I can get down and have this meeting in New York City now to talk about, go figure, the budget. So thank you very much for amending the agenda for me.
Thanks very much.
you.
We will now have our CUNY panel with the Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Christopher Rosa, who is an old friend, or a friend of long standing, I should say, and Kathy Abada and Gail Mello, President of LaGuardia Community College, and one of CUNY's very fine community colleges.